So the first question might
Nita,
that if self is something which is a formal structure, then how can we club it with the category,
how to make this big?
historical category of of
Not to
modern
make
or
it
modernity?
big.
So of all this, so this is the first question we would like to discuss here.
Yeah, yeah.
And for this, I would like to distinguish the
This.
notion of the self in
No.
uh,
See,
studied in the philosophy of
this one.
mind.
Either.
Hello. Niharika, some disturbance in the sound are coming. Can you look at it?
Here.
Can you ask some participants mute to mute themselves?
Yeah, I've forced mute for everyone, sir.
Okay, okay.
But yeah.
So, so coming back to the point, so the self is one. The self is we understand in the philosophy of mind, where the what is the nature of the self, how the self connects to the experience. These kind of the studies are done. And second, we think of self in relationship in the historical understanding of the self, which is basically done in the modern, postmodern philosophy. So here we are more focusing on the historical understanding of the self, that how the self has been understood in the different ages. So we start. Before starting the with the postmodern philosophy, we would like to delve into the notion of the modern philosophy, that what is the modern philosophy, because only then we can understand the salience of Niharika, I am audible?
Yeah.
No sound is coming now, it's fine.
Yeah, okay, sir.
Yeah, so basically we have to understand what is the notion of the modern self, because only then we can understand the salience of or the significance of the post in the postmodern philosophy. So basically, modern philosophy starts with René Descartes in the history of Western philosophy. So René Descartes starts with very interesting problem. He says that how do I believe on my senses? Because suppose if and he does a thought experiment and he says that suppose if there is a demon who is deceiving me, and whatever I see, whatever I touch, taste, or smell is actually the trick of that demon, and all the life I am seeing, and I'm so I'm believing what is actually a illusory experience. So how can I rely on my senses? Then he comes with a solution. He says, I can doubt anything, but I cannot doubt my doubt. So this means at least we cannot doubt what is actually our consciousness, because it is the consciousness which poses the doubt, and it will be self contradiction. So here we are not like analyzing the merits or demerits of Descartes' thought, but what we are actually focusing here on the that what defines the modern philosophy. So if you see that, you will find that modern philosophy basically deals with a particular method. Unlike the earlier ancient philosophy or medieval philosophy, modern philosophy started to think of philosophy in the terms of the method, that first we should have a proper method, then only we can delve into or embark on any epistemological or ontological inquiry. So philosophical discourse can only be secured or generated on the basis of a proper methodology. So this is what concerns here. So this centrality of the method, this defines the modern philosophy. And it comes as pinnacle in Immanuel Kant, who is the greatest philosopher of the modern times in Western philosophy. Immanuel Kant gives his philosophy is called as the critical philosophy, and he wrote a very famous and the groundbreaking book which is known as the Critique of Pure Reason. And he starts with the question that what is experience? How does an experience take place? And he says that in order to an experience, in order for an experience to take place, we need at least two elements. One is the sensation, and second is conceptual category. So only by the combination of the sensations and the conceptual category, a knowledge is generated. And of course, for Kant, knowledge is a proposition knowledge, which can be expressed in the terms of S is P, A is X. So through the predicate, you define something of affirm or deny something about the subject. Now here the important thing in Kant is that how through in this knowledge, he asked the question that there must be some binding agency, a faculty which will connect all these sensations together. Because whatever the sensations which are coming to us, it must be bound together, must be connected or synthesized by a faculty. And he called this faculty as self, that this is the transcendental self which connects all the sensation together and make it possible for any for us to own up any experience. Without granting a transcendental or connecting self, there cannot any knowledge cannot take place. So what Kant achieved through that, that because the self is freely synthesize the experiences, he freely synthesizes the various sensations. So this means self is basically free and autonomous. It is like an agent which freely combines the various sensations together without any relying on any psychological principle, because there are some philosophers who said, okay, this combination takes place on certain kind of the rules, psychological rules, which is habit, law of association. He said, no, that doesn't take place. Actually, we have a transcendental faculty which combines all together and it remains at the transcendental level. So in this way, in the modern philosophy, what happens, the autonomy and the free nature of the self has been affirmed. So this is we see that Kant now here turns from the pure reason to practical reason. What is practical reason? Practical reason is that which relates with the moral judgment, that how the morality is possible. So because I am the transcendentally free, myself is free at the transcendental level. So that is why ethics is possible, because ethics is based on the freedom. If there is no free self, ethics cannot take possible. Then we can naturalize the ethics on the basis of certain natural biological principle or some social laws. So in that way, now the thing is that Kant called this transcendental self as this faculty as the reason. That now what Kant achieves by all this exercise is that he was able to create a division in the self-consciousness. That in the self-consciousness, there is the one level is the empirical and another level is transcendental. So empirical, what we are experiencing, and in the transcendental level, we just watch upon it. We are just like a neutral observer, we see upon it. So hence it is possible, according to Kant, that we can engage ourselves from our psychological life, from our personal or cultural milieu, and see like a neutral observer that what is happening, like as a disinterested observer. That he calls as the faculty of the reason. So through the reason, we can build up the theories, we can build up the universal principles, which even we are located in some culture, we can transcend this culture, and through the faculty of the reason, we can build the universal theories, even in the sphere of the social sciences or humanities. Now, postmodern philosophy call it is a meta-narrative of reason, that it is like a big meta-narrative of the reason, and that is what they try to problematize in their work. But before coming to the postmodern philosophy, we have also need to analyze what was the cultural milieu actually, which fostered the postmodern philosophy. And the two major figures which actually paved the way for the postmodern philosophy is Freud and Marx. So Sigmund Freud, in his Psychopathology of Everyday Life and in other works, he also says that how through the slip of the tongue and the Freudian jokes, how the unconscious is something which problematize our simplistic understanding of the consciousness or the conscious mind. Similarly, when Marx talks about alienation, which of course in the Professor Menon has discussed in her class. So when Marx talks about alienation, so he talks about alienation at the three level. First is the alienation from the product, then alienation from the fellow beings, and finally the alienation from oneself. So both try to see that our relationship to the consciousness is not transparent. Consciousness is something, or the self is something which is already under the secret forces of the libido or unconscious or some capitalistic forces. So these are the structures which are not seen, but which shape the self. So self is not something which is self-constituting free, but itself is located in under the influence of some unconscious or forces or some capitalistic or social forces. So this was the milieu basically in which the postmodern philosophy emerged in France particularly. And there were many postmodern philosophies. Basically, there were a lot of philosophers in the who thought about the postmodern philosophy, like Lyotard, who first of all gave the name postmodernism. But there are some other philosophers like Foucault, Jacques Derrida, Deleuze. But here, because of our limitation, we will confine to two major figures of postmodern philosophy: Michel Foucault and Jacques Derrida. So Michel Foucault, who is basically a French philosopher, and he interestingly discussed, he gave the concept of the biopower. So the notion of the biopower is something like that. Foucault, yeah. So the notion of Foucault actually gives, the Foucault gave actually the notion of the biopower. And he says that it is actually, that there is no autonomous self actually. There is basically the self which is located in the power structures, and that is how the self is constituted. Now, how it is, like, it is very simplistic, but how Foucault comes to that. So he gives the example in his book, Discipline and Punish, example of a prison. So he gives, so this is, we have to think that he says, suppose in a prison, there is a, not suppose, he says, what is the actually the architecture of a prison? What happens that there is a tower. In the tower, there is a watchman, and he can see everyone, every prisoner actually, and but prisoner cannot see him. So this is the relationship, that he could see and watch over every prisoner, but prisoner cannot see him. Now what happens that after some time, and he in a way regulates the behavior of the prisoners because he can identify each and every person. So after some time, what happens? Prisoners themselves started to feel that as if they are being watched over all the time. So this gaze, actually, they feel the gaze is around them all the time. So they started to self-regulate. So we can understand right now in this era of CCTV cameras, other kinds of the surveillance mechanism. So he established the relationship between the surveillance and the and the power. So so basically he says that through this surveillance mechanism, what the modern state does, it creates the docile bodies, docile minds. So earlier, not only the power operates through the police or military, but the power also operates through the various institutions like the schools, colleges, university, hospitals, and other, and media and other places. So how does it happen? He says there is the regimentation of the space. First of all, the space is regimented. In these kind of the institution, there are certain hierarchies that some people can go into this area, some people cannot move into this area. So like this regimentation is started of the space. And the regimentation of the time also take place, that this is the time to come, this is the labor time, this is the free time. So gradually it make the, what he says, there is a normalization of the power. This is the normativity of the power has been is established. And gradually the people started to internalize that power. They also started to feel that this is the correct way, this is the proper, this is the improper way of functioning. So that's how he says that this power mechanism actually operates. Now he also, so very interestingly, he gives the example of he gives the example of a situation in a actually 18th century plague situation, that how at that time the people were quarantined and how and they were considered a threat to the normal population, and they were segregated from the main city, and each and every person is known actually how they are being treated, what are their age and all that. So he says that what the modern state does, it documents each and every citizen, because what the modern state requires is requires the productivity of a citizen. It wants that citizens should be productive, they should contribute to the economy, and that is why, according to Foucault, the life of the citizens becomes very significant, very important for the modern state. So what it does, it tries to control the citizens and train the citizen through the mechanism, through the school, colleges, and various time of the health program. So it started to document the people, and as the documentation of the people started, they become visible in the eyes of the state. So he says interestingly that in the monarchy it is the king who has got the most visibility, but now in the modern state the citizens got the most visibility, because the every data of the citizen is now available to the modern state, and now they can easily control and regulate and its citizen. So that is how the power has now make infiltration in the life of the people. So that is why he calls this is the biopower. Now there was also the question when Foucault was explaining all this in the discipline and order of the things. He also called that even the many disciplines like psychiatry and other disciplines, they also rely on that, because the psychology also creates, psychiatry also creates the category of the normal and the abnormal. Earlier the person was the different. He was a criminal, was some person who was a deviant in the society, who has not followed the moral conduct of the society. Now the criminal has got the category of psychopaths, schizophrenic and other people. So in this way, the psychology, the psychiatry created the categories, that this is the normal behavior, this is the abnormal behavior. Similarly, because a lot of his work is on the homosexuality, so he interestingly gives the example that the homosexuality considered in the modern, in the beginning, it was considered as a disease. But actually in the ancient Greece, homosexuality, especially if we read the dialogues of the Socrates and the Plato, so in the homosexuality is not considered like between a man or between man and man, or man woman or woman, is not considered as bad actually, because but what was interesting in that time, at that time the moderation was the most important question. It was not how you are partnered with a man or woman, but the most important thing is the moderation, that how you moderate yourself, how you live the life which is like a balance and the moderate. So but in the modern discourse this has been totally shifted because of creating the categories of the abnormal and normalities. So that's how the Foucault defined that how the power structure actually constitutes the self by creating these discourses. And then there was also the question, there was charges on Foucault that basically what he, basically he is a structuralist. A structuralist means that he has defined the human self in the terms of a structure, and there is a no role for no possibility of the agency or freedom. So Foucault differs with that, and he calls himself, and he was more into the post-structuralism, and he gave the notion of genealogy. So genealogy is basically the study of the history where you see where the exclusion has taken place, how categories of the normal has been created in contrast to the abnormality, healthy body in contrast to the unhealthy body, and you, by doing this and by focusing on these margins, you deconstruct the history. That is the mechanism of genealogy. Now at this point we would like to come to because this is the to another philosopher who also talks about exclusion and the otherness, Jacques Derrida, who is a French philosopher. So Derrida calls that the history of the Western philosophy is history of Western philosophy is basically what we call the history of the logocentrism. Logocentrism means that they always want to come to the presence, that there is some fundamental ground of the everything, and in that way they exclude the margins. So, and all of the work of the Jacques Derrida deals with that. But to give you, we take an example of work which he wrote on Edmund Husserl, who is a famous, who is the father of phenomenology, so to say. Edmund Husserl written a book which is called Origin of Geometry. So he asks the question in that what is the nature of geometrical truth. Husserl says the geometrical truths are basically ideal in nature. They are ideal. They don't depend on any individual culture or society. These are the ideal truth. But again, he raises the question that these ideal truth has to be communicated to the other people. If they are not communicated to the other geometricians or other people, then they will remain locked within the mind of the inventor, and it becomes a kind of a subjective truth. So he says that is why the writing of the geometrical truth is very necessary. Now Derrida takes up this point. So writing is the very necessary, but at the same time Husserl adds that writing is not something which is very essential to geometrical truth. It does not compromise the ideality of the geometrical truth. It is just like a supplement. Now Derrida enters at this point, which is very significant. He says, now what is actually happening, that geometrical truth which is considered to be ideal, now its ideality or its transcendental nature is compromised because of the writing. Writing which is just a supplement, which is considered just as something additional, now without a geometrical truth cannot gain its ideality or transcendental nature. So it makes the transcendental possible and also makes it impossible, because without writing, geometrical truth cannot define its ideality. So it makes both its transcendental nature possible and impossible. So hence here writing deconstructs the ideality. So this is the moment of deconstruction where you cannot, where the other cannot be, excluded nor included. So this is one example I would like to give from this lockdown experience. I hope I would make sense by that, but I would try to connect it with Jacques Derrida's this notion of the otherness. The lockdown experience ideally would be a transcendental experience. Like in the lockdown experience, we are not going outside. Whosoever we want to meet, we can call them. So the other, we don't get in touch with the other. But yet we have to go out even in the lockdown. Although government says that it is a Lakshman Rekha, we should not cross it. But the people have to go outside for buying the groceries, vegetables, and all this and all that. So the others, and for that we have to come into contact with the others. So at that time we try to eradicate the trace of other by washing, sanitizing the vegetables. But the thing is that the fear always lurks down. that this other can always like infect the self, so to say. So this is what he says, that is the double bind of the otherness. The otherness cannot be excluded totally, nor it can be totally included. So this is the double bind. So that's Derrida says, which shows that actually this makes us responsible towards the other. The other is not something which we can reduce its otherness or alterity. We cannot reduce to our understanding. So it is something which transcend our understanding. So there cannot be a epistemological relationship with the other in the terms of the understanding. Only the relationship which is possible with other is ethical. Now this I would like to conclude it with this notion of the genealogy or deconstruction of Derrida by an example which Gayatri Spivak, famous subaltern historian, she gives in her famous seminal essay, Can the Subaltern Speak? So she gave an example of a Bhuvaneshwari Bhaduri. She was a widow in the colonial time and she committed suicide. Now the thing was that actually later it was revealed that she was actually a member of a revolutionary party in Bengal, and she was given some task to assassinate some person, but she couldn't do that, and that's why she because of fear of being caught, she committed suicide. But the question before was her that at that time in Bengal or in India for that matter, a young widow, if she commits suicide, then it was interpreted in society as an illicit relationship with some male, and because of she getting pregnant, she committed suicide. That was the dominant interpretation that at that time. And she knew that if she committed suicide, she would be interpreted in that way. Now what she does, she waited for her menstrual cycle. So when she started actually to menstruate, then she committed suicide. So what actually happened at that time, her body become a kind of she written the text with her body. Her body itself become a text by which the people could interpret. And lot of the, so she has become a kind of a question mark that the people, because at that time nobody knew about her revolutionary credential, so nobody knew about that, but nobody people could put her in the basket of the illicit relation because she was menstruating. Only when the India got freedom, as Gayatri Spivak says, when it came to know, when her revolutionary past was revealed, then it was known that she was actually, that was the reason of suicide. So this is actually, this, if I can use the metaphorically, this menstrual blood is like a trace of the other. The otherness is something which speaks through that which cannot be denied, which cannot be which cannot be eliminated. So this is something which in the history, these kind of the otherness, alterity is in the history, which both Foucault and Derrida through their genealogy and the deconstruction try to unravel. So finally, if I conclude with this, that coming back to the notion of the postmodern self, and if we methodologically try to understand the difference between the notion of the modern self and postmodern self, so we can say the modern self, the self is considered free and autonomous. So it can have a transcendental position. It can be bereft of its embodiment, culture, and can have a what Rorty calls as a God's eye point of view, Archimedean eye point of view on the thing. While in the postmodern philosophy, it is acknowledged that we cannot jump outside of our body. We are located in the history, culture, power nexus. So there cannot be a totalitarian point of view on the thing. There is an acknowledgement of the differences. There are, so it shifts from while in the modern philosophy, there is the primacy of the self. Now in the postmodern philosophy, especially in Foucault, Derrida, Deleuze, and other Latrobe also, there is the primacy of the other on the self. With this word, I would like to conclude, and we can have question answers.
if anyone has a question, they may raise their hands so I can unmute them and then they can ask questions or they can type it on the chat. So we have one question.
Yeah. Which question?
Yeah.
Tell the question.
Yeah. Yeah. So the person will speak out, the participant.
Okay.
Yes, this is Jamil. I am from Kashmir, sir.
Okay. Yeah.
So I have a question related to that concept of biopower that you touched upon.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I feel that this concept of biopower is also related to the biopolitics lecture series of Michel Foucault.
Mm-hmm.
It was later extended by Giorgio Agamben, who
Mm-hmm.
gives us the concept of homo sacer.
Mm-hmm.
So how is this postmodern self, how can we relate it to that figure of homo sacer?
Mm-hmm.
Is there any resemblance? Because we see that in postmodernity, we have a self which is a sort of a fractured thing, which is not a whole.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other side, if we see homo sacer, that is a thing which is ghettoed, which is externalized or internalized at the same time.
Right.
So how is the relation between the two going, between
Okay.
homo sacer and the postmodern self?
All right. Thanks, Jamil, for the question. So this is an interesting question. As we all know that Foucault and Agamben are closely related and the state of exception. So, but still I think because in the Homo Sacer, he talks about the bare life. Because the Homo
Yeah,
Sacer is exactly who is in the bare life.
yes, sir.
The state of exception in the ghettoization, the life has reduced to the bare life. So in
Yeah,
bare life, we can understand that the self which was in postmodern self, like which is docile and all that, which was docile or like a subjugated. So it's still in this bare life, it totally reduced to bare nothing. So that is what actually Agamben's bare life Homo sacer regards, that how in the, especially in this ghettoization, how the life has reduced to bare life.
yeah,
But also I would like you to also see that we also need to see that Foucault in his later life also has moved toward the concept of the care of the self.
yeah.
So how do we see that actually in relationship to the Homo sacer? So that is an interesting research problem. We can discuss on that.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Any more questions? You may please raise your hands. Yes, Somashekar sir.
Good afternoon, Dr. Saurabh.
Hello, Dr. Sam.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can hear you.
Good afternoon. You said about biopower.
Mhm.
The power operates through time and space regimentation and through different systems and institutions, and establishes the normative kind of thing. And you also said the modern self is free to itself and it synthesizes and it combines all possible things, whereas the postmodern self says that we cannot really jump out of our influences and whatever the thing that we can through our cultures. I would like to ask, in these three different elements which you said, in the light of this COVID, have we experienced two different kinds of disciplines or this regimentation?
Okay.
One inside the house and one inside within the presence of where we stay. Are there any clear differences in the kind of, you said that lockdown is a transcendental experience. Considering that to be a transcendental experience, while we are confined to our homes, how do we feel our experiences? And we are expected to go out of the house. How do we feel in the light of these two different kinds of biopowers and regimentation? Anything in this direction?
All right.
Thanks.
So just I would like, I understood question properly, but as far as I can say it, that basically, as you rightly said, that in the lockdown experience, there is a like surveillance mechanism was very much there, because we remember like even after lockdown, what Professor Menon has given the example in the last talk about how her driver actually, even at the site of the police, he started to take the cover himself with mask. So this is what actually Foucault said, that is the internalization of the power. And one internalization not only at the disciplinary in the form of the police, but also the normalization of the power when you see, when you, it become a discourse through the media, through the various kind of the government agencies, that you started to, it become a normative discourse. Then we start to discipline ourselves within ourselves, within ourselves, that this is the proper, this is the improper. So, and it is very, so this is what actually the biopower operates everywhere. So ideally what I meant that transcendental experience of lockdown, where we actually would not have to go out, but we have to go out, so that the mix of the self and other. Yeah, that's what I have in the mind.
Any other questions? Yeah, so there's one more question. Yeah, Saurabh sir, I've unmuted you. You can
You hear me?
speak.
Yeah, which question?
Yes. Thank you very much. Very nice presentation.
I couldn't hear you. Can,
Hear me?
hello sir.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yes sir, yes sir.
Thank you very much. Very nice
Thank you
presentation.
sir.
I enjoyed it. I was wondering where, see, this is Western philosophy
Yes sir.
and postmodern. So where, how will you fit in with the conception of the self in our philosophy?
Yes.
And say, for example, in Chinese thinking. So can we kind of relate the concept of the self in alternative cultures, the concept you outlined in Western philosophy, modern and then evolving into postmodern? Actually, perhaps I should have asked earlier, because your answers to the previous two questions might depend on this. I don't know, like what Dr. Somashekar asked just now, I was thinking, but I don't know if it makes sense. Thank you.
So as sir, your, I think I somehow could grasp your question, because the voice was not coming properly. It was, so if I understand, you are saying that self is basically, this is basically the postmodern self is like the modern Western notion of the self, and how it could fit in with the more our experience of the self, like the Indian or the more Asian ways of the self. Is that the question?
Yeah, can you?
Yeah, I can hear. Yes, yes, yes.
In
Yeah.
Indian philosophy and other philosophies, other like Chinese, for example.
Yes, yeah.
How does it relate? It's an alternative conception of the self. No?
Yes, yes, yeah.
So, but we need to square up or put them together. So that's
Okay. Yeah. So that is very interesting, and actually, in fact, Foucault in his later works, which is called The Care of the Self, so he dealt with these questions, the queries you have been raising, because one thing is that mostly because of this globalization and this the modern state's mechanism, so this surveillance mechanism is more or less the part of most of the life words of the people, except some of the very few cultures actually are deprived of it. But as a nation state, it is more or less the part of the world. And what he pointed out, that it is actually what it is doing, it is in the capitalistic logic is reducing ourselves into a product in a kind of the disciplines, bodies and mind, which has to cater to the needs of the state. Now he says that, but if we go to the earlier philosophies, like he talks about the ancient Greek philosophy, but of course it is true in Indian philosophies and of Chinese philosophy as well, that there was altogether different, people had the different notions toward the self, where the people used to care for their self and the relationship with oneself and the weather were totally different. the relationships were different. So that is why he says, like he gave the example of Seneca and other people, that like care for yourself by asking the question, who am I? What is the purpose of my life? Which was know thyself, which was in the Greek philosophy. So these kind of the technique, what he calls the practices of the self, as he says, can actually quote unquote, like can counter this regimentation of the self. So I think that is very interesting. I think the various ways of the Indian philosophy, yoga and dance and other kind of the techniques which develops a deeper relationship with the self is the something by which uh, one can like transcend, not transcend, kind of a question and kind of a loosen this regimentation. So this I have the mind for now.
There's a question by Meera Kumar Menon.
Yeah.
She asks you, is the postmodern self devoid of free will? If it is, how can we explain in Derrida's concept of play? Can the lockdown experience be understood in the terms of play?
Well, first of all, before coming to this question that postmodern self is whether divide of the free will or not, let us discuss this, as you said, the Derrida's notion of the play. So as you notion of play in Derrida is basically that there cannot be a origin actually. So there is, because play can only take place, what he says in his work at structure science and play, that because there is no final origin. So sign refer to themselves, so there is a free play. Now, what is beneath this kind of jargon is basically that there is no essence actually. There is nothing, because whatever the essence of the thing can all be historically and the culturally established, because every discourse will lead to some other discourse. So there is not a final discourse. We can say, okay, here the things has been starting. So that is the postmodern notion of the play. Now the question is that what is the free will actually? In if we consider this notion of the self, that self is not a substance, it is not entity, then how the free will is possible? Now for them, they basically for them this free will or freedom is not something which is generated through the agency of of an individual. It is basically so they say the self is like what we can say, self is like a uh, 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 the self is like a various kinds of the like an album, photo album. I don't remember the proper word. That there is nothing. There's only the outward resemblance. There is nothing like the essential thing is there. So when I change from one self to the another, so what happens in that this free will automatically, this freedom automatically emerges. So the free will for them is like experimenting with one's identity. So this is what I have in the mind.
The next question is by Amruta Vale. She asked, how can the transcendental self be spoken of as a self? Here am I taking transcendental to mean universalized. Does the self need a boundary? Could you say only when you have an other, you can speak of something as the self?
All right. So basically, that's hence. So this is that is why self is qualified as the transcendental notion of the self in Kant, because it is not the empirical self which needs an other language, history, or culture. So transcendental self is defined in the terms of its formal structure. The formal structure is like the synthesizing, which is actually logically thought of, which is the logical condition base of any experience to take place, because we cannot access to the transcendental self, but we have to assume the ground, a logical ground, so that the unity in the experience can be explained. So that is what self is qualified as transcendental in Kant.
So there's one more question. There's one hand raised. Can you
Yeah.
please speak out the question?
So ask one question about the field you are currently working on, and I think it is Kashmiri Shaivism. I think
Yeah, who is there?
so. This is Jamil. Yeah.
Okay. Hi. Yes.
Yes, sir. Sir, I think that you have been working on Kashmiri Shaivism, so I have a question related to that. That goes like, if we see the philosophy of Kashmiri Shaivism, we see that if the body and the soul, there is a sort of connection between the two. And if we see the yogic practices that were practiced by these personalities, like we have Laladed or Abhinav Gupta or some other eminent personalities, there is a sort of a sync between the body and the soul. So they talk of a self which is a unified whole. But on the other hand, we have this postmodern self which is a fragmented one. How can we relate the two? So, what is the problem with that Kashmiri Shaivite self and this postmodern self?
Okay.
Don't they contradict each other?
All right. So that is an interesting question, although it was not in the scope of my talk, because I'm not here working on Kashmiri Shaivism and postmodernism, basically on Kashmiri Shaivism and notion of flesh and Merleau-Ponty. But that is an interesting question. So Kashmiri Shaivism, I don't think it is a metaphysical kind. It promotes the metaphysics of presence or the metaphysical philosophy. Why? Because I'm basically dealing with their text Vigyan Bhairav Tantra. In Vigyan Bhairav Tantra, there are many kind of meditations which Shiva tells to Parvati. In kind of meditation, which are not like negating the word and coming to the self, because in the regular meditation techniques, there are meditation techniques you negate the Prakriti and come to the self, like in Sankhya or in the Vedanta. But here what is actually happening, they give the very interesting meditation techniques, like see a friend and the joy wells up in your heart, be aware of that joy. Suppose if you are drinking some very cold sweet liquor thing, just melt your awareness in that sweetness. Now, so what I actually could see, that there is nothing like the subjugation of the Prakriti or the subordination of Prakriti in the terms of the consciousness. There is like a free between the Prakriti and the consciousness. So this is actually what interested me in looking at the Kashmiri Shaivism, that how they have not negated the worldly experiences, but affirmed the worldly experiences and thought of the transcendence through that. So that is what I am working, the problem of transcendence in Kashmiri Shaivism.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Any more questions? Any more questions from anyone? Would anyone like to make some remarks, some suggestions, some questions? Yeah, I don't see any more questions.
Right.
Yeah, so we would conclude today's lecture by Dr. Saurabh Doradia. We are really grateful, sir, for your lecture today and for giving us so much time also. So thank you, sir. Thank you everyone for joining.
Okay, thank you all.